A national political convention is one of the most important events in the political life of America. In July of 1988, the Democratic National Convention will meet here in Atlanta. This is the first time a Democratic convention, or for that matter, any political convention, has met in the Deep South in this century. It's been a long, long time since a major political party has brought its convention to the Deep South. Interestingly enough, this year, both the Democratic and the Republican conventions will be held in the South. The Republican convention will be in New Orleans, and of course the Democratic convention will be here in Atlanta. During the 2 or 3 weeks that will surround the 4 days of the convention itself, there will be about 30 or 35,000 people who will come to Atlanta from outside of Georgia, from outside of America. They will come from all over the world. There'll be 15,000 media people here. There'll be 5,500 delegates and alternates, and many, many more people who will have a great variety of interest in the convention, who will want to see and do and participate. There's several things that convention goers need and want when they come to a convention. One, they like to have good hotels, and Atlanta has good hotels. Secondly, they like to have good transportation so that they can get around with ease and convenience, and Atlanta has a good system for that. Third, they like to be secure, and that's where you fellows come in, and ladies, because one of the principal considerations in any convention is to have a warm, hospitable, secure atmosphere in which to conduct a convention. Now, security in these terms means more than just a protection from danger, although it certainly includes that. But it means being comfortable and secure and having a sense that the people in this community want the conventioneers there. And it's been my experience in the time that I've been here in Atlanta that the folks here are delighted to have the convention, and it will be a warm circumstance, and everybody will just do everything they can to roll out the red carpet for these 30 or 35,000 people. In the period of time that these folks will be here, the police forces of the various jurisdictions in and surrounding Atlanta and Georgia will face great challenges and great opportunities. There's nothing that can contribute more to the success of a convention than having an efficient, effective, courteous law enforcement effort in this community. And I'm sure from having worked with many of the people who are involved in the leadership of the various law enforcement agencies here, that we're going to have just that. And I know this training program that you're participating in now will contribute greatly to that goal. In the 4 or 5 days there from July the 17th and 18th and on through the 21st and the 22nd, Atlanta will receive more attention than any other city anywhere in the world. And that's literally the case. There will be more attention paid to Atlanta than to New York or to Washington or to Moscow or to Tokyo or any other city. Atlanta will be the focal point of the media of the world. And we all, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, everybody here in Atlanta has a great opportunity and obligation to make Atlanta and Georgia look good and be good for the world, because the world will be watching Atlanta in that period of time. It's of great importance to this state and this city and this community, and indeed to the entire South, because we want to show the people who come here and the people who see this convention what real Southern hospitality is. Atlanta is a great community. You have a great mayor and a great chairman of the county council and a great governor. You have a wonderful set of governing bodies. The congressional delegation has been extremely important. Everybody involved in this, the business community, the civic and social and religious leadership of this community, has been over backwards, and I know that each and every one of you will do the same thing in preparing for this convention. Now let me talk a little bit about the structure of this convention and how it's put together. There are 2 main groups of people or organizations involved and who have the responsibility to produce this convention. Here locally, we have what is called Atlanta 88. In every other city I've had any experience with, the city itself has been the host. But for the 1988 Democratic National Convention, there's a unique situation here. Atlanta 88 is composed of the city of Atlanta, Fulton County, the state of Georgia, and the Greater Atlanta Chamber of Commerce. These four groups have come together to organize Atlanta 88. Atlanta 88 is the official host for the 1988 Democratic National Convention. Mayor Young is the chairman of the board. Governor Harris is a member of the board. Chairman Lomax is a member of the board. The president of the Greater Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, Marshall Hahn, is a member of the board. And the chairman of the Democratic Party in Georgia is a member of the board. Bobby Kahn is the president of that board, and it is his responsibility on a day-to-day basis to run the operation of Atlanta 88. It's a unique responsibility, a unique organization with great responsibility, and Atlanta 88, its officers and the staff that it has, all have done a magnificent job thus far in preparing for the convention, and I'm sure that same high level of performance will continue throughout the convention. The other group, the group that has the ultimate responsibility for putting on a convention is the Democratic National Committee. Paul Kirk is the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. The committee is composed of people from every state and several other jurisdictions around the world, and this Democratic National Committee is responsible for putting on this convention. It is the ultimate responsibility of the Democratic National Committee to do so. The National Committee has an adjunct organization that's called the Democratic National Convention Committee Incorporated, and it's that entity that is charged with specifically doing all of those things and making all those preparations for the convention. Paul Kirk is the president of the DNCC, as we call it, and I'm the chief executive officer. I'm from South Carolina, just across the Savannah River. I feel very close to Georgia and Georgians and Atlanta. I've enjoyed my stay here, and it's been a very happy responsibility thus far. So it's these two organizations working together cooperatively in a good spirit that will produce this convention. And one of the main concerns that both organizations have is the security aspect. And we have a security committee. The chair of that security committee is Dick Murphy. Dick Murphy has been involved in Democratic conventions since 1968. He had my position in the 1972 convention that was held in Miami Beach, and he has held security positions in every convention since then. He's well experienced, and of course all of the chiefs of police and the sheriffs and the head of the GBI, the Secret Service and the FBI are all involved in ensuring that we will have a good, sound security operation for the 1988 convention. Now let me talk a little bit about what happens at a convention. Conventions for people in politics are terribly exciting events. People come and they want to have a good time, they want to be entertained, they want to be taken care of, but there are certain things that go on at a convention that have to go on because they are a major portion of what a political party does, and certainly what the Democratic Party does. The first thing that will happen at this convention, and it's a thing that everybody focuses on, is that we will nominate a candidate for President of the United States. Now, we don't know who that is now, but I think that we will know prior to the time the convention opens. There's no certainty of that. A lot of people say that we won't know and that the decision will actually be made here in Atlanta. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think that we will know we will know who it is prior to the convention. But nevertheless, even though we do know prior to the convention, the actual legal nomination will take place at the convention. That normally takes place on Wednesday night. It's the thing that everybody is most interested in. It's the event that captures most attention and that most people talk about. In addition to that, we will adopt a platform. Platforms are very important to political parties, and the platform will be adopted on Tuesday night. This sometimes is a point of great controversy. We hope it won't be this time, but a platform describes what the party stands for, what positions it takes on the major public policy issues of the day. And as I said, we will adopt their platform on Tuesday night. The opening night of the convention, which is on Monday night, July the 18th, is a lot of ceremony. We have a lot of speeches. The highlight of the opening night is the keynote address. We don't know at this point who the keynote speaker will be, but that person is normally someone who is popular, who is well known within the party, and who's a good speaker. The intent and purpose of the keynote address is to enthuse everybody, to make everybody happy and feel good about the party and about the convention. Now, I've sort of taken this in reverse order, but I will jump now back to the last night. The last night of the convention, which will be Thursday night, July the 21st, is a great night of celebration. It is when the presidential nominee makes his or her acceptance speech, and there's a lot of celebrating going on, and it's normally a point of great happiness and celebration. So the convention itself lasts for 4 days. The first night is the keynote speech. The second night we adopt the platform. The third night we nominate the candidate. And the fourth night the candidate makes his acceptance speech. I should add too that on the fourth night, on Thursday night, the vice presidential candidate is also nominated. It's tailored for a 4-night event. Now, conventions in the past sometimes have gone over that. I certainly don't expect that in 1988, but it could happen. It's a theoretical possibility, but the chances are pretty slim that it will last more than 4 nights. But that's a possibility, and if it should go more than 4 nights, we will just extend the sessions pretty much in the same order as we have the sessions in the first 4 nights. Now, when will the sessions be held? We have every anticipation of having all of the sessions at night. The sessions basically are geared for prime time on television. We try to maximize the television audience, and when you think about the East Coast and all the way to the West Coast, there are 4 time zones involved, and you have to try to split the difference more or less to get the maximum audience. So if everything goes according to plans, we will have the sessions each night somewhere between 7 to 8 o'clock. They will begin at 7 or 8 o'clock and will end around midnight or sometimes over to 1 a.m. We would like to have shorter sessions, and if we can arrange it, we will have shorter sessions, but that's kind of a planning rule of thumb. They start at 7 or 8 and they'll be over about midnight. Now, sometimes conventions get involved in a lot of controversy. And if we have big fights over the platform or big fights over rules and credentials, and all of these have happened in previous conventions. They don't have to happen. They don't happen every time, but sometimes they do. If we have these fights, it strings out the conventions, and we would have to have day sessions probably. If we had day sessions, they would probably begin sometime around 11 a.m. or noon and run to 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and then have a recess and come back for the night conventions. There's nothing magical about that, about those time frames, but that gives you some idea of what we anticipate. Right now, we think and hope that all of the sessions will be at night. Now, let me mention just 1 or 2 other things about what goes on at the convention. Most of the delegates and alternates will come in on Sunday. They'll come in by air, come into Hartsville Airport, and we will have a system set up out there to greet them and take them to their hotels. But a lot of people will come in several days before that. They like to get here early. They have business to attend to, their committee meetings. And so I think it's safe to say that for the week prior to the convention, the week that begins on, I guess it's the 11th, Monday, the 11th of July, that there will be lots of folks coming in to Atlanta to be here and to have a good time and to prepare for the convention. But the great flux of people, maybe 20,000 of this 30,000 people, will come in on Sunday, the 17th, and they will leave on Friday, the 22nd. There's a great exodus on Friday. A few people will stay over, but there generally is a great exodus on Friday. At conventions, we also have a lot of people who have very serious concerns about issues and about matters that are going on in America and around the world. And they like to demonstrate, and they do demonstrate. One of the most significant challenges that security people, policemen, have to take care of is to ensure that those people who do want to demonstrate, who want to express visually and vocally their concerns about issues, have an opportunity to do that in order, in good taste, and in full recognition of their constitutional rights. This is a balance between what we hope will be an orderly convention with everyone having the full opportunity to express themselves in an appropriate manner. We anticipate that there will be an area designated for demonstrations, and many of you will be involved in that, will be involved in overseeing that operation and ensuring that it's done properly and in good order. We certainly want to make sure that people's constitutional rights are protected. We want to have a good, orderly convention, and I think with that balance and with both of those things, we will have a wonderful convention. Now, I think I've said most of what I need to say, except that those of us who are involved in the day-to-day preparations of this convention are dependent on the citizens of Atlanta and Georgia more than we can ever express. There's no way to hire enough people to make this convention go right. There's no way that we can communicate face-to-face with enough people to get the message across. We're dependent on the media, we're dependent on organizations in the community, and we are clearly and definitely and overwhelmingly dependent on the public safety officials in Atlanta, in the surrounding counties, in Fulton County, and in the state of Georgia. We need your help. You have a tremendous record of fair, effective law enforcement, and we know that with that kind of support and with that kind of performance, the kind of performance that you are known for, not only in this state but all over America, that we will have a good convention and you will contribute greatly to it, and for that we are deeply appreciative.
Hello, I'm Deputy Chief W.J. Taylor of the Atlanta Bureau of Police Services. In February of 1987, the National Democratic Committee advised the city of Atlanta that they had been chosen to host the 1988 Democratic Convention. Shortly thereafter, I was chosen to head a task force that would develop a security plan that would ensure that we would have a safe and uninterrupted convention. My first meeting was with the Democratic security staff. At that meeting, they advised us that they felt, based on their experience in other cities, that we would need a minimum of 3,000 police officers to be able to ensure a safe convention. In order to be able to gather support from surrounding areas, a meeting was called with all the department heads of the metropolitan area, where we solicit their support in the event that we should need it. That support was readily given. We then began a series of meetings with the planning committee, and it became readily apparent to us that it would be virtually impossible for us to coordinate the loan of police officers from all metropolitan jurisdictions. It was therefore decided that we should concentrate our attention on the large police agencies within the metropolitan area. And to that extent, we decided that we would try to come up with 1,400 police officers in order to provide security for the convention from the following agencies: the Fulton County Police Department, the Fulton County Sheriff Department, the Georgia State Patrol, the GBI, the Atlanta Bureau of Police Services, Secret Service, and the FBI. We received a commitment from the head of those departments and from the governor of the state of Georgia that these resources would be made available to Chief Redding at his request. And to that extent, a second committee was formed, this committee headed by Chief Redding, and on that committee is Sheriff Richard Langford, Chief Clinton Chafin, and Robert Hamrick, representing all of the resources of the state of Georgia. With that in mind, we now had an assurance from these department heads that we had a commitment from them to provide a minimum of 1,400 police officers dedicated to the convention, which would allow us to continue to provide service to the citizens of the city of Atlanta, to the state of Georgia, and to the county, Fulton County. I suppose one of the things that is of concern to you here today, and that is, how will this convention affect you and your family? I'm hopeful during the 4 days in which the convention will be here, which is July the 18th through the 22nd, keeping in mind the fact that we will probably go to 12-hour shifts around the 15th through the 22nd, but again, the convention is 18th through the 22nd. It will affect you as follows. Every officer committed to this convention and those that were remaining on their assignments will be required to work 12-hour shifts. It will also mean that you will not have off days, that you will not be able to take vacation, and I suppose of critical importance to many of you, that we will not allow you to work extra jobs during that time. The issues of compensation has not been resolved, but be assured that those of you not working extra jobs, there will be adequate compensation for you. There have been some discussion as to who will be in charge of what activity. Let me just say this as a point of clarity. There will be a few dedicated work sites, but all in all, we will be working from a pool of personnel assigned as needed. The dedicated work sites are as follows. The Atlanta Bureau of Police Services will provide perimeter security for the Omni itself. This is where the actual convention will be held. The Georgia State Patrol will provide perimeter and internal security at the World Congress Center. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation will provide escort service, along with the State Patrol, will provide escort service for the protectees and the Democratic VIPs. Now, the FBI has agreed to provide a support role in that they will assist with the intelligence gathering operation, which will be known as ITAG. They will also assist with SWAT operations and EOD activities. All other personnel that are assigned, as I indicated earlier, will be assigned to a pool. Now, I suppose you're wondering, what is the Democratic Convention? The Democratic Convention consists of 6,500 delegates, alternates, and their families. These delegates and alternates will be in our city for the purpose of taking care of the business of the Democratic Party and selecting or choosing a presidential candidate. We will also have 15,000 members of the media. These members of the media will be from all over the world. And during their stay in Atlanta, Atlanta will become the spotlight of the entire world. No city in this world will receive as much attention as Atlanta will between July 15th and the 22nd. These members of the media have a charge of ensuring that they provide their hometown a story every day. It is my hope and my prayer that their stories will reflect positively on our city. I would hope that at no time will a report leave this city indicating that the men and women of the law enforcement community in the state of Georgia was any way other than professional. Now, in addition to the media, I think a primary concern to us will be the fact that we will have in excess of 100,000 persons in our city for the express purpose of exercising their First Amendment rights. Earlier this year, I had an opportunity, along with Chief Redding, to visit San Francisco and to communicate and talk with the people that coordinated the security during the 1984 convention. And they shared with us their concerns and issues that was raised during that convention. For instance, during one demonstration, there was 100,000 persons that marched just to advocate gay lesbians' rights. I can assume that we will probably have at least 100,000 persons in this city that will be here for the purpose of exercising their First Amendment rights, regardless of the topic. Now, the only good thing about that, I suppose, is that we know that 95 to 180% of those persons will be here for the express purpose of having a good time and to let everybody know that they are concerned about a particular issue. Now, there will probably be 1 or 2% of those persons that are here for the express purpose of being arrested. Now, you can be assured that we will accommodate those persons that insist upon being arrested. But at the same time, we will portray an image of professionalism in whatever we do. The image of the state is critically important, and the success of this convention and the security of this convention rest in your hands. Only by demonstrating a professional attitude and tolerance will we be able to ensure that we have a peaceful convention, that we will have an orderly demonstration, and everybody will leave the city of Atlanta feeling that we or they have been in a city that has a professional law enforcement agency and courteous citizens. The training that you're about to receive is to provide you with all of the knowledge and information that we have, in the hope that we be able to anticipate every possible scenario that can occur during this convention. In addition to the training, we will provide you with a law enforcement booklet that will provide you with the phone numbers of all key locations that will be used during the convention. This law enforcement bulletin will also provide you with phone numbers and other pertinent information that you will need to be able to provide the citizens with information. For instance, many of you are not familiar with the city of Atlanta, so we will make sure that you could be able to provide any visitor to our city with the location of any important site and a direction to that site should they ask you about it. As we indicated earlier, it is the responsibility of the city of Atlanta and the other 6 law enforcement agencies to provide overall security within the city limits of Atlanta. In addition to providing overall security for the city, the Secret Service has the primary responsibility of protecting the candidates and the convention center itself. I have with me here today Mr. Bill Hoskins, who is the agent in charge of the Secret Service office here in Atlanta. And at this time, I would like for Mr. Bill Hoskins to come up and to share with you his role, or the role of the Secret Service during this convention. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Chief Taylor. I'm Bill Hoskins, Special Agent in charge of the Secret Service here in Atlanta. I welcome this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the history of the Secret Service, how we got in the protection business, and what our role will be in the Democratic National Convention. The Secret Service was organized in 1865, right after the Civil War, to combat counterfeiting, which is still one of our roles today. In 1901, after the assassination of President McKinley, the Secret Service was directed to begin protecting the President of the United States. McKinley had been the 3rd president assassinated in a 36-year period following the assassination of Lincoln and President Garfield. The Secret Service remained a rather small government agency until the assassination of President Kennedy in 1963. Following the Kennedy assassination, at which time we only had about 350 special agents, our role has grown dramatically in the area of protection and in investigation. Until today, we have approximately 2,000 special agents. In 1968, following the assassination of Senator Robert Kennedy, following the California primary, President Johnson directed us that very week to begin protecting the major presidential candidates. That executive order was later enacted into law by Congress, and since 1968, we've had the responsibility to protect the major presidential candidates in the United States. Along with this role, we have then taken over a security function in the Democratic and Republican National Conventions. How do we do this? We do this basically like we would prepare for any major presidential or vice presidential visit here in the United States. Jim Posey of our Atlanta office has been selected as our DNC coordinator, and he's currently working with Chief Taylor and others to develop a security plan to protect our candidates during the 1988 Democratic Convention. We'll begin at the airports where the candidates will arrive, which could be one of any of the 3 major airports here in the Atlanta area. We'll develop a secure motorcade route. We'll develop motorcades. We will set up a security plan for the sites that these candidates will visit, the events that they will attend, the hotels or residences they will spend nights in. And of course, our major function here will be to coordinate the security at the Omni along with Chief Taylor and the Atlanta Police Department. The other function that we will be involved in during the convention time period has to do with the coordination of the intelligence gathering that might affect any of the candidates that we're protecting. When the convention's over, hopefully on Thursday night, we will then have a nominee for the President and a nominee for the Vice President of the United States, at which time we will commence protection for them and their spouses. Jim Posey and our advance team are coordinating our security needs with Chief Taylor and others in the local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. During the convention time period, the eyes of the world are going to be on Atlanta, and I'm confident that we will do our jobs in such a professional manner that nothing but praise and a secure environment will be the results of our efforts. I thank you, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the weeks and months ahead.
Today, Dr. Larry Howard answers questions from the law enforcement community concerning AIDS. With Dr. Howard are Larry Oxford, Trooper T.V. Russell, Lieutenant W.H. Phillips, Sergeant D.W. Dunlap, and Sergeant M.P. Jones.
I'm Dr. Larry Howard. I'm director of the Georgia Crime Lab, a division of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. I have training in bacteriology, pharmacology, and pathology, and have been doing autopsies in the state of Georgia for the past 32 years. During that time, I found that a little bit of care very often protects, or in fact has always protected me against any accidental or casual contact with disease, or at least as far as its transmittability is concerned. I did one of the first AIDS cases in Georgia long before it was officially identified as an official disease. The group that's with me today is interested in talking about and gaining information about transmission of AIDS through accidental or casual contact. This is not to imply that there is any danger from casual contact, but we intend to discuss that possibility. Okay, a little background information to start with. What's an infection? And an infection is a disease produced by an infective agent. In this case, we're talking certainly about AIDS. What is an infective agent? And that's a bacteria or virus capable of invading the body. In this case, we're talking about the virus that produces AIDS. Third definition actually is infectivity. That's either the ease or the difficulty with which an infective agent enters the body. AIDS is passed from one individual to another through the intercession of a living lymphocyte. And a lymphocyte is one of the formed elements in the blood. In other words, blood contains three types of cellular elements, one of which is the white cell. And one of the types of the white cell, one of the blood cells, is a lymphocyte. And the lymphocyte, one particular type of lymphocyte, is the agent that's responsible for transmitting AIDS. Now, infectivity is determined partially by the barrier, or the effectiveness of the barriers to infection. In the case of AIDS, skin is a very effective barrier. Mucous membranes, particularly those that are quite thick, for instance, like those in the mouth, are an effective barrier to the transmission of AIDS. Anal membrane is not as effective, which we know because of the possibility of transmission through homosexual contact. And the reason it's not as effective is that it's much thinner than either the skin or the mucous membranes, for instance, in the mouth. Now, in addition to the body's normal barriers, we can add artificial barriers. And one of the best artificial barriers, of course, is a pair of gloves. And I wouldn't think of doing an autopsy without a pair of gloves. I do run into communicable diseases occasionally. The ones I worry most about are tuberculosis and hepatitis virus. I do not have a fear of AIDS, and AIDS, in my estimation, is one of the lower has a transmittability risk that is much lower than many other diseases. So additional barriers such as gloves or clothing or extra clothing are advisable if you're trying to prevent infection by any infective agent. An antiseptic, that's a material that kills either viruses or bacteria, and certainly would be effective in helping to prevent the spread of AIDS. Now, there's nothing wrong with old-fashioned cleanliness. I wouldn't think of completing an autopsy and then not washing my hand, no matter what protective clothing I had in my possession or had worn during the autopsy. I wouldn't think of picking my nose, for instance, after I'd done an autopsy, because that's an invitation to whatever infective agent is present to enter the body and cause an infection. Washing your hands after any type of contact is just simply good cleanliness procedure. The pathology groups over the United States do not greatly fear AIDS. In other words, pathologists in general are more worried about other infective agents than they are about AIDS. The only individuals who have caught AIDS doing autopsies are those who have cut themselves during an autopsy. And I think that's pretty much a background on AIDS, and I think probably in order to get a better handle or get a better understanding of AIDS, that we need to start with some questions about AIDS and talk about basic principles in our answers.
Dr. Howard, is AIDS starting to spread outside the known risk groups?
The only originally known risk groups, of course, were three. That is, homosexuals, intravenous drug users, and people who receive blood transfusion. The only additional group that's now at risk are prostitutes.
Dr. Howard, if we do CPR, what type of special equipment should we use?
I think the CPR people have developed a special shield that minimizes the exchange of saliva during CPR. I think it's wise to use this. The transmission of AIDS during CPR would be minimal, and I think we should talk about principle here. The greatest infectivity risk with AIDS is through blood. In other words, blood has the highest concentration of lymphocytes. Next to that is seminal fluid and vaginal fluid. After that, the virus has a lower concentration in saliva, almost a concentration that's almost nil in sweat and tears and urine.
Dr. Howard, can I get AIDS by drinking from the same glass or eating from the same dishes as a person with AIDS?
No. There's two problems there in terms of transmissibility. One is that the AIDS virus dies very quickly once it's outside the body. And secondly, that saliva, which would be the only source of contact there, or possibly mucus, has an extremely low concentration of lymphocytes. Therefore, the chances are in essence nil.
Dr. Howard, if I arrest a person who has AIDS, is there any danger from their sweat when it gets on my skin or on my hands?
No. Sweat, again, has a concentration of lymphocytes near zero. And in order to get AIDS, the lymphocyte has to get into your bloodstream. So their sweat has a very low concentration to start with, and it has no portal of entry under the conditions you suggested.
Is there a test for AIDS?
Yes, there are two tests for AIDS, a presumptive test called the ELISA test which has a fairly high percentage of false positives. Therefore, it must be backed up by a confirmatory test called the Western blot test. And these tests both test for antibodies to AIDS.
Dr. Howard, how contagious is AIDS?
AIDS has a very low contagion rate, except in the risk groups. In other words, again, injecting blood with lymphocytes or getting your blood contaminated with lymphocytes from an infected person will have a high probability of passage of AIDS. But other than that, and the homosexual contact, the likelihood of getting AIDS from an infected person is very low.
Dr. Howard, what if during a search of a suspect you should accidentally get stuck by a hypodermic needle?
Well, hypodermic needles, of course, might theoretically contain some lymphocytes, some blood. But it also takes some pressure to push the material inside the needle into your skin. And if the needle is pushed into the skin, the tendency is to push it back out the other way. If the needle is backed by a syringe, then there's a possibility of entry of blood into the bloodstream. I think it's a very low probability, however.
Dr. Howard, can you get AIDS from public toilets, telephones, and washrooms?
No, the AIDS virus, again, dies very quickly when exposed to air and drying takes place. So I think there is the possibility of transmission from a dry object is nil.
Dr. Howard, if blood from a contaminated person is spilled on my patrol car on the seats or some other type of matter, how do I decontaminate that vehicle?
Again, AIDS virus is very easily destroyed by the usual antiseptic agents. Soap and water, Clorox, Lysol, all are effective in killing the AIDS virus. So again, a little bit of care in terms of physical cleanliness can reduce or eliminate, actually I should say eliminate, any possibility of AIDS transmission through that mechanism.
Okay, as an officer, what would I do with blood, semen, spit, feces, urine is thrown on my face, my body, or my clothing?
Again, the cleanliness approach is the best approach. Wash your hands and your face with soap and water. It will kill the virus.
How is AIDS transmitted?
AIDS is transmitted by the entry of blood products containing lymphocytes from the infected person into your body. If that transmission doesn't occur, that is, if no lymphocytes get into your body, no transmission of AIDS will occur.
What precautions should arresting officers take in approaching high-risk group members or known AIDS-infected persons?
Well, I think, again, being careful. There's nothing wrong with being careful. And if after you've come in contact with an AIDS person, washing your hands is the best way of preventing any possibility of infection. I don't think any possibility really exists. But if, for instance, a lymphocyte or a group of lymphocytes or a clot of lymphocytes was to get on your hand, there is, I think, a small risk if you were to put your hand on a cut on your face. In other words, if you got into an altercation with an individual and you got their blood on your hands and then you touched an area on your face where you've been injured, that there would be a possibility of transmission. But those are the only conditions under which it could be transmitted to your body.
Can you get AIDS from eating in a restaurant where someone is employed as a cook or a waiter who has AIDS?
No. I don't see any possibility of picking up their lymphocyte in the food that's prepared.
Doctor, how long does the AIDS virus live outside the body?
Well, of course, it depends on the pool of lymphocytes. Theoretically, if we had a pint of blood spilled on the floor, those lymphocytes in that pool of blood would live until that blood dried. And it might live as long, I think maximally, maybe 3 days. But I think that would be excessive. As soon as the blood dries, the AIDS virus is destroyed.
Is there any danger of me taking the AIDS virus home to other family members from my body or clothing?
No, as soon as the AIDS virus gets on your clothing, and assuming you're wearing something that will result in a drying action like cotton, the AIDS virus dies. So I think that's the only possibility of taking it home, and as soon as it's dry, it's dead. So again, the possibility of carrying it to your family is nil.
Dr. Howard, how do women contract AIDS?
Well, some women, of course, are IV users. The prostitution, people that indulge in prostitution are have a high AIDS incidence, and I'm not sure whether it's through the sexual activity or through their drug activity, but a high percentage of prostitutes are infected. So then we have two groups, those that use IV drugs and those that are prostitutes. Now, ordinarily, heterosexual sex will not result in the transmission of AIDS virus. However, in the case of prostitutes, there's a possibility through multiple sexual contacts of lesions occurring in the vaginal mucosa. Also, prostitutes have a high incidence, I assume they have a high incidence, I haven't looked at these statistics later, of other venereal diseases, which include lesions in which contact from blood to semen or vaginal fluids to urethra will result in an increased probability or increased infectivity or an increased chance of getting AIDS.
What precautions should officers take in transporting a known AIDS victim, like to jail or to court?
Well, I think the biggest risk involves getting into an altercation with the infected AIDS suspect. And if there is no altercation and there is no breach of the protective barriers, that is, in the officer, there is no possibility of getting AIDS.
Can you get AIDS by touching someone who has AIDS?
The answer to that, of course, is no, because again, you don't, unless the individual is bleeding and you've got some blood on your hands, and then you'd have to get the blood into your body, into your bloodstream to get AIDS. So if you keep your hands away from your mouth and face or from any cut, and don't have a cut on your hands, or use gloves, there is no possibility of getting AIDS by casual contact. Again, part of this is using good common sense.
Doctor, just how safe are the rubber gloves?
I think they're very safe. And again, I use rubber gloves at autopsy. And the only danger that I have ever come up against is the breach of the glove. If I cut myself through a glove, then whatever that individual would have would be transmitted to my body. But I've cut myself, and I do cut myself occasionally, even on rotten bodies that have a high incidence of infective bacteria. And I just make the cut bleed, washes out the cut, and then I bandage it and continue with the autopsy.
Okay, Dr. Howard, while dealing with a violent and disruptive person, you get scratched or bitten, will you catch AIDS?
AIDS has a fairly low concentration in saliva. There shouldn't be any AIDS underneath the fingernails. There are viruses that can be transmitted through bites. Certainly rabies is one. If I was bitten by somebody who I knew had AIDS, I would immediately wash it and treat the area with a Lysol-type antiseptic. We wouldn't want to use an antibiotic-type antiseptic or antibacterial agent because it has no effect on viruses. But if we do that, then we kill all the lymphocytes or any lymphocytes from the suspect that happen to get on the victim's skin, and that, I think, maximally reduces the chance of getting AIDS. I know of no incident where AIDS has been transmitted through a bite.
Doctor, does the promiscuous sexual contact increase the risk of AIDS?
Yes, it does.
I have no other question.
Is there an incidence of AIDS in police officers?
I know of no police officer who's caught AIDS on the job. I think that probability would say that there may be a police officer around somewhere who has AIDS, may have caught it through some other way, for instance, a blood transfusion.
Doctor, if a person who has AIDS is in the patrol car with me, it's kind of close quarters. Is there any danger the person's breathing the same air
No, I think even if you got AIDS virus in your mouth, that the lining membrane of the mouth is very thick, and then you would swallow the virus. And you'd say, well, would that give me AIDS? And the answer is no. The gastric acidity would kill the AIDS virus. I think in summary, the chances of getting AIDS through casual contact is minimal. The AIDS virus, it does not have high infectivity except for the at-risk groups. And I don't see any possibility, and in fact, I see a great deal of hysteria that's unfounded based on the low infectivity of AIDS.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Duff. I'm a special agent with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Today with me is Jeff Holmes, a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have been asked to present some groups and other intelligence information to you in preparation for the upcoming Democratic National Convention. As with any large activity, a certain amount of planning is necessary. Today we hope to be able to acquaint you with some of the groups that we will encounter during the convention. Some of the groups that we talk about today will have had past instances of criminal behavior, while others are non-criminal but are being brought to you for familiarization purposes. Jeff will begin by talking about some of the non-criminal type groups.
As we said, not all of the groups that we're going to look at or talk about today are criminal in nature or have ever committed criminal activities. But we, because of our responsibilities as law enforcement people, have got to be aware of these groups and of their potential for attracting a sizable crowd and of their potential for attracting a large number of people to Atlanta during the convention, putting on demonstrations and trying to gain media attention and trying to gain the attention of the convention delegates and people within the convention.
The Interagency Threat Assessment Group has been charged with the responsibility of gathering information on groups who plan to demonstrate during the convention. At this point, we have no idea of how many people will actually come to Atlanta for the purpose of demonstrating. Many of the groups that we will talk about today are mentioned because of their presence during previous conventions. We will highlight particularly those that had a strong presence in the 1984 convention in San Francisco. One of the larger demonstrations during that convention was held by NOW, the National Organization for Women. There was no violence at that convention, and we anticipate none by that group in Atlanta. The abortion issue is sure to be one that will cause people to voice their opinions. Each year we have people who demonstrate either pro or against the abortion issue throughout the country. This can be a very volatile issue, and most people have an opinion either pro or con abortions. Officers who are involved in watching the demonstrators in this particular issue should be cautious from both internal and external threats. If the pro-abortion people are demonstrating, there is a possibility that onlookers or spectators may become rowdy and cause problems. The police in San Francisco advised us that one of the largest demonstrations they had was that of the motorcycle enthusiast. Most of them were protesting the helmet laws. As you know, Georgia has strong helmet laws, and we might see the same type of activity at the convention here this year. In San Francisco, they were able to turn the motorcyclists back at the bridge because they did not have a permit to parade during the convention in 1984. Jeff will now discuss some other groups which do not have strong criminal histories.
Jim, before I move on to these other groups, let me make a few comments about the abortion groups. First, every year on the anniversary of the date that the Supreme Court allowed abortion, there's a large rally held up in Washington, D.C. by the anti-abortion or the Right for Life groups. This year, that rally attracted approximately 20 to 25,000 people who literally drove from across the country to arrive in Washington in time for that rally. Now, there's no indication that this size group will rally in Atlanta during the convention. However, this is possibly the kind of numbers that we might see associated with an issue such as this. Another important point I think that needs to be made about the abortion issue is that there have been some acts of violence associated with the anti-abortion or the Right for Life groups. Primarily, these acts of violence have been against facilities and clinics which perform abortions, and it's generally property-type crimes directed at the buildings or facilities themselves, but they have occurred, and I think we need to be aware of them during the convention. Moving on to several other groups, the first group I'd like to talk about is the Georgia Earth Alliance, or the groups which believe in rights for animals. Again, this group is not necessarily violent. Generally, it gets by with protests and holding demonstrations in support of their cause, but there have been several instances of violence at facilities which sponsor experiments and tests using animals. Primarily, there have been some incidents in California at several universities, and with the Emory University complex here in Atlanta, this is one possibility. Another group which we see in Atlanta approximately twice each year is a No Business as Usual group. This is a group which likes to demonstrate. Generally, it's against U.S. government policies. Their demonstrations are usually peaceful, though they do like to get out in the middle of the road, tie up traffic, try to disrupt things, and generally a number of them have to be arrested each year when they protest. Another group that could possibly show up during the convention is the farmers groups. We all know that the farmers groups have from time to time formed large demonstrations and parades in support of their cause, and the convention would be an ideal time for them. Generally, the farmers groups are also non-violent. They'll usually bring a lot of their farm equipment into town, hold some kind of a parade and demonstration, and go about their business. However, as we have seen from time to time in different parts of the country, to include Georgia, sometimes their activities can turn to be violent. They can use weapons, will bring weapons with them, and could possibly be a bigger threat. Another large group which we expect will be demonstrating and holding several parades is the groups in support of the gay rights causes. We know that Atlanta has got a fairly significant population of gays, and we know that from time to time they do get out and support their causes or demonstrate for their causes. Again, recently in Washington, D.C., a large rally was held by people to support gay causes and to demonstrate in favor of funding for AIDS and the AIDS issue. And at this rally, they were able to attract and bring in approximately 200,000 of their people. A significant point to associate with this group is the fact that during this demonstration, they specifically went out with the intention of having a number of their people arrested. They did this in a peaceful, nonviolent manner. They blocked several public buildings and several public streets and intersections, but they were going to be arrested. It resulted in the police having to arrest approximately 700 of them during that rally. Again, there was no violence associated with it, no resistance. It was simply something that had to be dealt with. We may see examples of this type of activity here in Atlanta.
One of the points that must be made, particularly concerning the gay rights group, was one of the main issues in Washington was protesting Georgia's sodomy law. We feel for this reason and the reasons that Jeff brought up that this very well could be one of the larger groups to demonstrate. As Jeff pointed out throughout this whole first section, most of these people will not be a real problem for police. If they decide that they want to be arrested, generally speaking, they will not fight or cause police trouble. They may sit down and make police handcuff them and carry them off, but by and large, they are not known to be particularly violent. Caution should always be taken when dealing with any mass arrest so that the crowds do not become incited and cause further problems. The next groups we would like to discuss would be those of the white supremacist groups. Most of these fall into the category of the various factions of the Ku Klux Klan. Many names are used by these groups: Southern White Knights, the Christian Knights of Ku Klux Klan, the National Association for the Advancement of White People, National States Rights Party, the Aryan Nations, the White Aryan Resistance, and the Civilian Military Resistance. Most of these people advocate pretty much the same philosophy, and that is the predominance of the white race to the exclusion of other races and religions. David Duke is a national candidate for the whites' rights groups this year.
This is a photograph of David Duke, who we have already mentioned is a legitimate candidate for president, running, as he claims, on the Democratic Party ticket. David Duke is from Louisiana, but he's very familiar to a lot of law enforcement in the Atlanta, Georgia area, as he has been here on numerous occasions, to include the Forsyth County, Georgia March of 1987, when in fact he was arrested there, and also, as we have mentioned, he announced his candidacy for president up in Marietta, Georgia. This photograph depicts J.B. Stoner there in the red sport coat and polka dot tie. J.B. Stoner is really one of the oldest members of the KKK type groups here in the Georgia area. He's been active in some of these movements for approximately 40 years. J.B. Stoner is a convicted felon. He was convicted for bombing some churches in the Birmingham, Alabama area, and served some time in federal prisons within the last few years. J.B. Stoner is a very vocal individual, very vocal anti-black individual, and generally when he gets in front of a crowd, he's very good at inciting the crowd. He lives in the Marietta, Georgia area, and so we're sure he will be active during the convention. This is a photograph of David Holland, another local Klan leader. David lives in the Gainesville, Georgia area. One significant thing to notice about David is his dress. As you see, he's wearing the camouflage military-style dress rather than the traditional Klan robes. A number of the Klan groups have recently adopted this manner of dress and go around in various forms of camouflage clothing. David Holland is one of the more vocal anti-black Klansmen in the area, and he's known for his particularly nasty vocal slogans and racial slurs that he'll use to incite a crowd. If we see David Holland in the Atlanta area during the convention, we can probably look for a little bit higher potential for trouble than with some of the other Klan leaders. This is a photograph of Cecil Cox, one of the local Klan members. Cecil Cox is not a Klan leader, and the reason we're showing his photo is to talk for a moment about some of their radio communications equipment that they've now taken to utilizing. As you see, Cecil Cox is wearing a radio headset. Several of the Klan groups have adopted radio communications as a means to gather their own information and gather their own intelligence during some of their marches and protests. Several of their members will go around the fringes of the march or protest, keeping an eye on the law enforcement activity and reporting back to their head of security as to just how heavy the law enforcement activity is. They utilize the radio headset, as you see here, as well as utilizing the standard handy-talkie that we're all familiar with. Another thing of electronics equipment that they utilize that we should keep in mind is that a number of the Klansmen wear body recorders or hidden recorders of one type or another, and they've got the habit of going up to law enforcement personnel, trying to engage them in conversation, and basically trying to get some derogatory comments on tape. So you should be aware when talking to these people, as well as aware when talking to any of these type groups, that they may in fact be trying to record you to use later on. This photograph depicts a number of Klansmen in their robes. As you see, they wear different colored robes and have different rank insignia on their sleeves. We won't go into what the rank insignia means because it's not that important for our purposes. One important point about the robes is the fact that they are a very effective way for some of the Klansmen to carry concealed weapons. Generally, at the marches and rallies that have been held, law enforcement agencies working them have found several of the Klansmen to be carrying concealed weapons. One trick that they like to pull on law enforcement just to see how they react is to carry some toy or plastic weapons. So you should try to determine whether in fact they are carrying real or pretend or play weapons. Another point to keep in mind is the Confederate flags that they so often carry. Oftentimes these flags are carried on sticks or baseball bats or some other pole like that, which can become an effective weapon if trouble should develop. This is a photograph of James Farrens from Connecticut. Farrens is the national Ku Klux Klan leader and is one of the more prominent and active figures nationally in the Klan movement. Farrens has been in Georgia on several occasions over the last year and a half and has attended several of the rallies that have been held in Georgia. This photograph shows Danny Carver from the Gainesville, Georgia area. Again, Carver is another one of the local Klan leaders, and he has been very active over the last year and a half to 2 years in organizing some of the Klan rallies and meetings that have been held. His group is particularly big in attempting to recruit new members and passing out literature at their rallies and demonstrations. His group is not that vocal and does not tend to incite a crowd as much as several of the others, but he is one of the more active Klan leaders in the metropolitan Atlanta area. This is a photograph of James Venable. James Venable is one of the original Klan leaders in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and his association with the Klan goes back over the last 40 or so years. Venable is a resident of the Stone Mountain, Georgia area and is also an attorney who has defended a number of Klansmen over the years. James Venable is most noted here lately for the fact that every Labor Day a large Klan rally is held on his farm property up in the Stone Mountain, Georgia area and traditionally attracts most of the Klan members from around the area. Other than that, his activity of late, because of his age, has been limited with the KKK groups.
Georgia has been the scene of many demonstrations over the last few years, particularly those in Forsyth County, where the Klan and its affiliated groups have demonstrated and made themselves, their presence, very well known. The potential for violence with this group is certainly one that cannot be overlooked. They can cause problems from themselves, or they can cause onlookers to be incited and to bring about fights and other confrontations. Another group which has been active over the last few years has been the Posse Comitatus. This group is also an extremist to the right and is against most of the government's policies, particularly those concerning the tax laws. They have had a violent history and have had several confrontations with the police, including situations where people have been killed. They are known for taking over federal buildings and any other types of disruption that they can cause. Jeff will now address some of the groups which are predominantly black.
Jim, before I move on to those groups, I think one point that should be stressed about some of the white groups, and you mentioned it there, was David Duke. We all know that David Duke is running as a candidate for president. He's running, at least in his own thinking, as part of the Democratic Party, and in fact he announced here in the Atlanta, Georgia area his candidacy as a presidential candidate. So I think the presence that David Duke has during the convention is going to be a big factor in determining how much presence some of the KKK-type groups have. If he is here and if he's very active, then I think that's going to be a lot more support, and a lot more of their members are going to be around supporting him and trying to demonstrate on his behalf. So I think that's one important figure that we should all pay attention to over the next few months and will help us determine exactly how strong and how active the KKK groups are. Now looking at some of what we see as the predominantly black groups are some of the groups that we think of as who have picked up and have started to follow the black Muslim religion and black Muslim teachings here in the United States in the last few years. There are a number of different groups and factions that are active within the Atlanta, Georgia area. We see them from time to time over the last year. We've seen them at several of the different rallies and marches that have been held, and they're generally peaceful, they're generally nonviolent and what have you, but they are here and they do have a fair presence. A number of these groups we can identify because they've adopted some of the traditional Middle Eastern Muslim type dress, such as wearing long shirts, wearing hair coverings and hats on their heads, and wearing sandals on their feet. Some of the other groups, though, will not be determined by their dress in that they just wear normal dress. Groups such as the New African Peoples Organization, the Republic of New Africa, the Nation of Islam, the Black Hebrew Israelites have all been identified as being present in Atlanta and have all been active in Atlanta over the last several years. We may see certain of these groups protest or hold demonstrations trying to gain the media attention. Again, most of these are nonviolent, and we do not forecast them engaging in any violent activities during the convention, but the potential is there. Another group that we need to mention that has demonstrated some violent activities over the last several years is the Yahwehs, which is another group, an offshoot, if you will, of the Black Hebrew Israelite group. The Yahwehs have been involved in some criminal activity, particularly in the New York and Miami areas, and if we see any of their members in Atlanta, there is a high potential for violence associated with these people. Another group that may possibly be active that we should be aware of during the convention is some of the Jamaican gangs that have been identified in Atlanta. Across the nation, law enforcement agencies have identified the Jamaican gangs as primarily being involved in drugs and gun-running type activities, and this is what has been seen in the Atlanta area. But again, the number of people that will be in town for the convention, the fact that these people will probably have a fair amount of money and be spending money during the convention may make it an attractive target for people such as these Jamaican gangs to come out and try to actually sell them drugs or get involved a little bit more in the drug dealing. So we should be aware that they are in the Atlanta area, that they are involved in drugs, and that they are heavily armed themselves, usually.
Jeff, on these groups, there's two significant points I think we need to bring up, and that's that some of the groups help by identifying themselves by the clothing that they wear. The Yahwehs predominantly will be in white. They are not ashamed of their group in any way. They will have Yahweh written on the side of their white cars, or if they have the buses, which they often use, it will be identified with large letters indicating that they are Yahwehs. Another group which should be at least brought to your attention so that they can be identified as the Rastafarians. And you see these around Atlanta particularly. They're usually identified by the dreadlocks, the hair and braids, and they have a religious cause and also very heavily involved in the proliferation of drugs. They big into marijuana smoking and against any of the federal and state laws concerning controlled substance. Most of the other groups, I think, would just probably be in normal attire unless they're in the dress of their national country, as Jeff pointed out.
Jim, now that we've talked about the groups that are predominantly American in nature, let's turn our attention to some of the possibly international influence groups that we might see or be aware of. We all know that the international terrorism is a problem throughout the world. Fortunately, in the United States over the last several years, we have not had too many instances of terrorist activities sponsored by foreign countries or foreign groups. However, with the media attention that will be focused on Atlanta during the convention, this is a possibility. I think the best way to look at this and the best way to assess this situation is to keep our eye on world events, keep our eye on current events as the time for the convention draws near. The situation in the Persian Gulf that's currently ongoing, the situation in Israel with the demonstrations and riots in certain parts of Israel, if these things are still continuing to happen during the convention, then possibly some of these groups or countries are going to look at the convention and try to do something during that point. It's not a very high area of concern right now. It's not a very high area that we expect a lot of difficulty or a lot of trouble during the convention, but it is something that we must be aware of. There is a significant population of Middle Eastern students and people living in the Atlanta area. The numbers are here if they wanted to do anything, if they wanted to get involved, and we all know that it's relatively easy enough for foreigners of any type to get into the United States. So that I think that this is a possibility we have to be aware of and we should think about, but that it's not one of the things that's going to be of utmost concern during the convention.
This ends the list of groups that we believe may have a presence in Atlanta for the convention. We ask that all of the officers involved in the security detail remember that the ITAG, or the Interagency Threat Assessment Center, will be continuously gathering information concerning any of these groups. If between now and the convention you receive information that you believe would be of assistance, please pass it through your superiors so that we can be sure to include it in our intelligence reports. Now that we have finished with the portion concerning those groups that have a political background or a political cause, we would like to turn our attention to the criminal element that is motivated by the profit motive. They will be coming to Atlanta for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to gain money through all sorts of means.
Jim, first let's talk about some of the general criminal activity that I'm afraid will possibly be on the rise during the convention, simply because we will have so many visitors to our town during that time. We'll know pretty much where they're staying in terms of most of the hotels and all. We'll know where they have to come each day, down to the convention center and to the World Congress Center. And frankly, the opportunity for crimes being committed against these people is just there, and it's so much greater than at normal times. Obviously, pickpockets are going to be on the loose. They're going to know that the crowd is there. They're going to know that the crowd has money. They're going to be around, I think. Robbery and mugging type criminals will probably be on the rise, will probably be a lot more than normal during other conventions. Burglary of hotel rooms may become a problem, as everyone knows that about all the hotels will be completely full of people, and again, these are some very influential people, and they've got money and valuables that they may forget to lock up in secure areas. Another thing that we may see a fair amount of is car theft. And the reason for this will be that most of the delegates and most of the candidates and their staff and people, once they actually arrive in Atlanta, will be shuttled back and forth between the Omni and the World Congress Center and their hotels by buses. Therefore, if any of them drive, particularly ones from the surrounding states close to Georgia, their cars will probably be left up at the hotels and motels during the day and will be excellent targets for car thieves to try to make off with. Another category of criminal activity that we may see on the rise would be some criminal activity associated with escort services or prostitution type activities. In particular, because again of the kind of crowd and the kind of people that will be in Atlanta at this point, we're going to see some of the sophisticated prostitution type activities. The kind that we've seen in other cities across the nation, to where the girls are relatively well dressed. They'll go into a hotel, a bar, or restaurant, strike up a conversation with a lone male or with a single male, maybe pretend that they're out celebrating a divorce or raising a job status or something, and then take the male back to the hotel room, slip them some kind of a Mickey Finn or other drug, possibly in a drink or something. Once the individual is knocked out, go ahead and rob them. We know that these kind of activities have gone on across the nation, as we said, and they're kind of on the increase here recently, and I think this is going to be one problem that we're going to see in Atlanta, and we should be aware of particularly around the hotels and motels. But generally the potential is there to see a lot more of the street-level type criminal activities going on. We should all be on alert to make sure that we're aware of these things and constantly vigilant to try to keep them down as much as possible during the convention so that we have a safe and secure convention.
The last section we want to cover today would be that of the con artist. Cons are created and born every day. What we'd like to do is take a minute and familiarize you with some of the more well-known con games, and we're going to stay right up front that this by no means is a complete list, because even as we speak now, we feel sure that somebody is coming up with a new con. One of the oldest cons that seems to be in existence was invented in China actually 1,000 years ago, and that's the pigeon drop. Most of us have been in law enforcement for any length of time have heard about this. It's done with usually 2 or 3 accomplices, and the victim is usually an older person, the same age group that many of the conventionaires will be in. A person claims to have found some large sum of money on the street or on the sidewalk, walks up to the victim, agrees to, doesn't know what to do with it, asks the victim for advice, and they talk about it for a few minutes, and then the second person comes up and says, listen, no, I think we ought to do is split this. They agree if the victim will put up a portion of cash to show good faith, jewelry or whatever, that they will wrap it into a handkerchief or kerchief or something and hold it until they go in, and first thing you know, the switch is made and the victim is left holding a handkerchief full of newspaper. There's several variations on this, but most of you are familiar with it. Another group that we feel sure are in Atlanta and we hear about quite commonly is the quick change artist. And this person starts out going into a crowded supermarket or store, asking for change for a large denomination bill, and as the person is maybe giving them the change for a $50 bill, they then ask, will you please break that 10 up, and then they just get them confused, and first thing you know, the fast talker or the quick change artist has gypped the teller out of some money. The bank examiner scheme is another one which is used, although it may not be seen during the convention as much as some others, but it usually involves people who live in a city because they have to have a bank nearby. But the con artist approach is usually an older person again, tells them that they are sometimes a member of the bank or possibly a police officer, and they suspect that a teller has been cheating on the bank. The older person is asked to go in and withdraw all their money, and they want to allegedly check to see if the teller is being honest. They come out, they give the money to the police officer, and told that the police officer will ensure that the money is redeposited back in their account, and obviously they're gone. The 3-card monte has as many variations as any of the other scams. It's sometimes called the shell game. You've all seen it on TV or heard about it, but it's the old pick a card trick or the pea underneath the pecan shell. We anticipate that we will have these type people there. The till tipping is a con game used primarily by gypsies, and what this amounts to is a team of con artists will go into a grocery store or another department store and create a diversion at one end of the store, maybe a fight, a ruckus, or knock over shelves or something, and the manager and other people will go up in that area. While this is going on, the other person will be checking out. When they turn their head, they will grab the cash out of the register and run out the door. The toilet swindle is a con that you don't hear about too often, but it does seem to be rising in popularity. And one way that this has worked is there will be an older gentleman, somebody with gold, apparently rich by the type of clothing he has, will go into a restroom. There will be 2 people pulling the con off. One of them will be a hobo or a bum-looking person, or maybe a young boy. The other one would be a person pretending to be a security officer or a policeman. The older gentleman is in using the facilities, and the policeman walks in. Already inside the restroom will be the hobo or the bum. he immediately starts screaming, saying that this older gentleman is a homosexual and that he has approached him with homosexual advances. The older gentleman is obviously embarrassed, and he agrees after some conversation and a lecture by the police officer to pay off a stated amount in order to keep his name clear. They find that it's cheaper to just pay the police officer money than to run the possibility of taking the matter to court, being embarrassed over homosexual charges.
In summary then, what we've tried to do today is give you a brief overview of some of the groups and individuals and people and activities that we'll be seeing a lot of during the convention. We've tried to cover some of the national United States-based groups. We've touched briefly on possibly some international groups, and we looked at some of the activities that they may be involved in. The convention is going to be a media event. The eyes of the world are going to be focused upon Atlanta, and therefore, with the proper information beforehand that we've been able to put together and will continue to put together, we should be prepared to handle any type of situation or any group that comes about. Remember that we have put together a joint law enforcement agency, the Interagency Threat Analysis Group, which is already working to gather information on some of these groups and some of these people that will be in town during the convention so that we can provide everyone a safe and secure convention. But remember, probably the best thing that we have going for us is the policeman on the beat, wherever he may be, gathering information about the people and about the activities that are going on wherever he may be. And so we would encourage you all to be aware of, as the time approaches for the convention, unusual things or people that are taking place or that are coming about in your jurisdiction, and report these through your superiors so that this information can be gotten to the ITAG.
Jeff, I'd just like to echo everything that you said and know that if we all work hard between now and July, and in particular during that week in July, that we will be able to produce a Democratic convention that the nation, the state of Georgia, and in particular the city of Atlanta will all be proud of. Thank you.
Is copyrighted and is of a confidential nature intended for law enforcement use only. Duplication for any purpose is strictly forbidden. Procedures covered for bombs and bomb threats are for law enforcement personnel assigned to the 1988 Democratic National Convention to be held in Atlanta, Georgia. This tape was produced with the technical advice of other agencies by the Georgia Department of Corrections, David C. Evans, Commissioner. A bomb threat is a verbal or written threat which can result in personal or property damage through the placement and detonation of an explosive device. Unfortunately, there is no exact method for determining if a bomb threat is real or merely a hoax. However, as a general rule, true bomb threats are more detailed than a hoax. In 1986, the Department of the Treasury, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, indicated that nationally, 36,262 pounds of explosives were reported stolen. Of this amount, 23,170 pounds have been recovered. During the same period, 1,009 bombing incidents, 262 incendiary incidents, and 1,161 other types of explosive incidents were also reported to law enforcement authorities. In the following analysis of explosive incident targets, 3 major groups are identified. 1. Commercial targets. The motives are revenge, vandalism, labor-related, and extortion. 2. Residential targets. The motives include revenge, vandalism, and homicide. And finally, vehicular targets. The motives include revenge, homicide, and political protest. Although the most common filler for a bomb continues to be black powder and dynamite, a seemingly unlimited number of explosives are in circulation, both militarily and commercially. Let's take a closer look at some of the explosives and also show what happens when they are detonated. Blasting caps. Blasting caps are most commonly used as initiators to set off explosives. The most widely used are electric and non-electric, military and commercial. These are highly sensitive. Do not touch. Dynamite. Dynamite is commonly utilized in the construction field due to its ready availability. The law enforcement officer is more likely to come in contact with this type of explosive. Tovex. Tovex is a safer type of explosive that is replacing dynamite. The explosive force is equal, but it is safer for the handler to use. It is also readily available from construction sites. C4. C4 is a military plastic moldable explosive that produces a shattering effect and detonates at a higher rate of speed than dynamite and commercial explosives. TNT. TNT is a high-order explosive that is attainable through commercial and military outlets and is available in solid and flaked form. The use of TNT preceded the development of plastic explosives. FlexX. FlexX is a high-order explosive similar in composition to C4. FlexX comes in thin sheets, which makes concealment easy. The potential exists for its utilization in letter bombs. Detonation cord. Detonation cord is a high-order explosive which appears as a rope-like cord that is packaged on a spool. Detonation cord can be found in any color and is also referred to as det cord. Gas bomb. The gas bomb is readily available, easy to manufacture, and highly explosive. The destructive force depends on the quantity of flammable liquid and type of liquid used. These explosives were prepared and detonated by bomb technicians for demonstration purposes only. In case of an actual bomb or bomb threat call during the 1988 Democratic National Convention, the officer receiving the call will follow these procedures. When an officer receives a bomb or bomb threat call, he or she will notify the respective communications center and site supervisor, who in turn will notify the Democratic Convention command post. Upon arrival, the officer will limit his radio communication due to the possibility that such communication may detonate the explosive device. It's extremely important to rely primarily on a visual inspection. Any movement may detonate an explosive device. The officer will supervise the search together with building personnel who are highly familiar with the area. The building personnel may be able to point out items out of place or that do not belong, which could contain an explosive device. Let's take a closer look at an actual building search. When an officer arrives on the scene, he or she will begin by conducting an overall visual check on the outside of the building. Start the first sweep of the building by a careful inspection of all lower areas of the building, including the surrounding surface areas such as grass, concrete, and wooden surfaces. After a thorough lower sweep, begin an upper sweep of the building, using the same procedures as in the lower sweep. Pay special attention to loose wires, broken or open windows, and door frames. The inside building check is next. This begins with an overall visual inspection of the room. Be aware of the possibility of booby traps. To begin the first sweep, inspect all objects resting on the floor or built into the walls. Such items might include wall and floor heaters, water heaters, and lower cabinets. The second sweep should include all objects from waist height to the ceiling. Although most rooms may require only 2 sweeps, certain types of furnished rooms may require 3 or 4 sweeps to complete the search. When required, the third sweep usually covers the area between the top of a standing person's head to the ceiling, including air ducts, window tops, and hanging light fixtures. The fourth sweep will include an investigation of false or suspended ceilings, indirect light fixtures, electrical wiring, and ceiling ducts. The room search is terminated only when the officer in charge is satisfied that an adequate search has been made. The vehicle search is next, and is one of the most critical due to the technical sophistication of switching devices. The officer responding to the call should first evaluate the nature of the threat by collecting as much information as possible from the owner or driver of the vehicle. Determine what factors might indicate a bomb, such as evidence of tampering, a suspicious noise, or an unfamiliar object. The actual or physical search of vehicles suspected of containing an explosive device will be handled by a qualified bomb technician. Many everyday objects might not resemble an explosive device, but in fact could be a deadly bomb. Improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, can be made and hidden in such items as briefcases, lunch boxes, and wooden boxes. The bomb can be of any description, left only to the imagination of the person making the bomb. Remember, do not touch any suspected device, but instead follow the correct procedure outlined earlier in this video. As you have seen, even an innocent appearing object can be deadly. Leave the handling of these devices to the trained experts. Now, let's cover the procedure followed by a certified bomb technician when responding to a bomb threat. Law enforcement personnel assigned to render explosive devices safe are not only highly trained, but also have at their disposal a large amount of special equipment for handling the devices. Let's examine a typical well-equipped bomb squad's inventory of equipment. Each piece has a special purpose. For example, the bomb squad's van transports all equipment needed on a bomb call. The van also pulls a highly specialized explosive container, which can transport suspected explosives to a safe area. Let's look closer at the equipment that would be found inside a bomb squad's van. First, the Freon tank. This piece of equipment produces a sub-freezing temperature and, when properly utilized, may temporarily disrupt an explosive device. The fluoroscope is used to look into small packages or briefcases. The fluoroscope produces an instant view of the contents of a suspected explosive device. The golden X-ray machine produces a documented picture of the contents of a suspected device, enabling the technician to intelligently handle the suspected package. The bomb suit provides a protective covering for the bomb technician to approach and handle the suspected device. The bomb technician's toolkit contains the basic tools and equipment that are used by bomb technicians in handling suspected explosive devices. The water disruptor will remotely disrupt an explosive device by means of a special water charge fired into the device's container. When the bomb technician arrives on the scene, he will take charge of the situation. The bomb technician will make a decision to evacuate the building area, if it has not already been evacuated, to a distance no less than 300 feet from the suspected device. All law enforcement officers must remember that render-safe procedures are defined as those actions taken by a qualified bomb technician to prevent the loss of life and, if possible, to prevent property damage. The procedures that deal with the technician's aspects of handling, transporting, and eventually the disposal of the explosive device will not be shown in this video. Law enforcement officers will not touch, move, or attempt to render safe any explosive devices. In review, if any law enforcement officer assigned to the 1988 Democratic National Convention receives a bomb call or bomb threat, they should remember: notify your dispatcher and site supervisor. Limit your radio communication. Supervise the searches with persons highly familiar with the area. The bomb may have any type of physical appearance, left only to the imagination of the bomber. Searches should focus on items that are out of place. Any movement may detonate a device. Search for secondary devices. Do not touch any suspected device. The bomb technician on the scene will take charge. Only bomb technicians will search vehicles. Remember, the handling of any suspected explosive device by an untrained person could be deadly.